So, Cole Rush, we are not here for a late screening or a page to screen. I'm popping this on you now. This is a long gestating idea. I
Yep.
figured let's just do it. I'm calling us Bond and Determined because we're going
Not
to talk
extreme
about
bondage.
extreme bondage might give people the wrong idea. I wanted to do that, but I also don't have the leather ensemble for it.
I don't think anybody wants to see that with you and I.
You know,
Actually, people might. You never know.
yeah, I mean, we're handsome. We're eligible dudes. Well, neither of us are eligible anymore.
But we're dudes.
That's true. That's very true.
I
And
like Bond and Determined. That's a really good one, actually.
thank you. So at one point forever ago, we were talking about let's talk about all the James Bond movies. I think possibly in order. That's not going to happen. Other things that aren't going to happen, at least right now, because the day that we're posting this episode, the latest James Bond film, No Time to Die, was supposed to hit theaters. And it's just not. It got pushed back to, I think, Thanksgiving now.
Who knows anymore?
Yeah. So we're, instead of No Time to Die, we're going to talk about a film that kind of rhymes, GoldenEye from 1995. It's 25 years anniversary. It is the dawn of a new James Bond in Pierce Brosnan, whereas No Time to Die was the swan song for Daniel Craig's character. And
Wait.
hmm?
Oh, gotcha. No, I'm with
Yeah,
you. I was connecting dots, just they were the wrong dots.
which dots were you connecting?
I thought that you were saying that just like No Time to Die was. I was confusing the bonds. Let's just leave it at that. I'm already
Oh,
confusing myself. But yes, you what you said is correct, and my derailing of the conversation has nothing to do with your correctness.
well, thank you. Speaking of correctness, this is a parallel that struck me watching GoldenEye last night. The phrase political correctness, because one of the, I guess, bits of skepticism from some corners of the internet in looking at No Time to Die was that Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who is a noted feminist creator, had said some things that had concerned certain fans of the Bond franchise. You know, we're eliminating the phrase Bond girl. This is going to be a much Bond is going to be sort of taking a step back in terms of the characters that are surrounding him. It was sort of this idea that I think he had been retired and he was coming back into action, and there was a black female James Bond-esque type character who had taken over the 007 moniker, and that they're partnering up, I guess. So yeah, that kind of rubbed people the wrong way. In 1995, with GoldenEye, you had Pierce Brosnan stepping into the role as a brand new iteration of James Bond, and very pointedly with the first female M, played by Dame Judi Dench, in an iconic role by now, was saying, James Bond, you're a male chauvinist pig. You're a relic from another era. I disapprove of you like smoking and womanizing. So it's like we're coming full circle a quarter century later. It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. And on that note, I think that I don't actually know her name, which does not speak well to the point I'm about to make. But I believe it's Natalia, or am I just pigeonholing Russians into the name Natalia?
Which one, the girlfriend or the assassin?
The not Famke Janssen, the
Okay,
the one that's the programmer.
yeah,
Um,
we'll call her Natalia. That sounds like it checks out, but maybe at least it's not Natasha.
I had trouble with everybody's name except for Bond, so this is not a this is not a specific criticism. But I really liked Natalia. I thought that she had a bunch of valuable skills, and she added to Bond's mission in this case. I should probably preface this by saying that I've only ever seen before today Die Another Day and then the Daniel Craig Bonds, and that's it. So I have no prior reference, but I have played some of the video games, and I know kind of that sexist world that James Bond, the bubble that he lives in. But this one was refreshing, especially for a movie that came out when I was 4. Like this this woman is not a foil to him. She's not just a sex object. And like, yeah, they do get it on a few times. Like that's just classic Bond, right? But she offers a lot. She stops the computer from launching the satellite, and that's as vague as or that's as specific as I can be, because there's all sorts of wacky shit that happens in terms of the actual plot of the movie. But I was really happy to see a Bond girl quote unquote, serving a role that wasn't just that bubble in which he exists. She had things to offer. She had skills to help them on their way. And as much as she needed saving, so did he. And she was there to do it for him. And I really appreciated that about this movie. I thought it was a bit progressive, especially considering its time. One of the many ways in which it's kind of ahead of its time, if you will. There's lots of really good action sequences, just some really interesting ideas in the movie. And I genuinely really liked it. I've always been a fan of Bond, but never, like I said, so much that I've delved deeper into the series. And this kind of opened up that door for me. And I'm like, okay, I want to see what's up about these. I was a bit worried because Casino Royale is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I love the action, love how modern it is. It's just a really clean, fresh take on Bond, right? And I was like, I remember Die Another Day being pretty terrible and campy. And I wanted this to circumvent that notion. And it really did. It was a down-to-earth Bond movie, as close to down-to-earth as it could be, I guess. There's still all that campy, wacky, super villainy plot, but it all feels real enough within the context of the movie. And that I really appreciated. So GoldenEye for me gets 2 thumbs way up. That's my new thing. Nobody else has ever said that before.
I think it might catch on. No, it's interesting that you feel that way. I have a slightly different take on it. This is only the second. Well, let me step back. You said that you've played some of the Bond video games. Have you played the GoldenEye video game?
Yes, but I was probably in middle school or early high school at the time.
Right. Is it as great as people say it is? Because that's like a legendary. That was an N64 game, right?
Oh yeah. So I'm thinking of Nightfire actually. I did play GoldenEye, but at the time when it was in its heyday, I was too young to play games with guns and stuff. So it was pure osmosis. And then later on in life, I mean, it's good. The hard part about a shooting game is if you only have one joystick, like on the N64, you can't really move and aim. It just doesn't really work. But it kind of set the stage for a lot of great games to come. So in that regard, it's great. And playing it again feels good and fun, but it's not like some polished experience that you're going to look back on as some hugely critically acclaimed thing. It moved mountains, but they're not there anymore. It moved them away to a place where you don't need the mountains.
Well, speaking of not being able to move and shoot, I mean, that seems to be James Bond's MO. He has Pierce Brosnan is rocking a machine gun throughout GoldenEye, and he uses it. He shoots wildly, almost like someone who's just turned on a flashlight and they're trying to like figure out where stuff is in a dark shed. There's no like aiming or strategery. That's a Bushism. But no, he's just like spraying at everything. It's crazy. For as cool as he is,
he's a very hopeful marksman.
He's not suave when he's handling that gun. But so yeah, it's interesting that Martin Campbell directed GoldenEye, which introduced a new James Bond for a new era. He also directed Casino Royale, which introduced a new Bond for a new era, 11 years later. And I want to say there were 3 Brosnan Bonds, and by the end it was pretty dire. And there was Die Another Day, and then The World Is Not Enough. I don't know if there was one after those. And again, I'm not a Bond aficionado. I've seen a few of them. I have a bunch of blank spots in terms of my old school Bonds. I think I've only seen like 2 of the Connerys and maybe one of the Roger Moores when I was like 5. Honor Blackman, who was one of as it was noted in Trainspotting, the quintessential Bond girl, she passed away this week. And so this is a tribute to her, even though I don't think I've ever seen the movie that she was in. Anyway, so what is GoldenEye? You want to do the plot outline? Can you do the plot outline?
Of course. Russians bad. Europeans and Americans good. Americans are jaunty, haughty, kind of jokes to the Brits. But essentially, okay, here's the actual plot. James Bond and his buddy 006, you'll know that James Bond is 007 from the universe. Yes. They are on a mission to stop some Russians from doing something. And the Russians kill 006, and then Bond escapes with his life barely by jumping into a plane that is falling into a ravine. and then flying it. Um, so there's that. And then he goes back to MI6 and he's like, I have a hunch. And they're like, okay, let's not talk about what that hunch is and send you out to pursue it. So they do so. And he goes out and he basically finds that they have an EMP that can destroy entire electronic systems on like a citywide scale. And I'm talking huge metropolises. So Bond's like, oh shit, better stop that. You don't want that satellite, it's called GoldenEye. Don't want that satellite getting up in our business. So this is like a drug history episode. So they continue. He meets this girl who was programming at a site that was nuked by the EMP, essentially, one of the few survivors. Later on, both Bond and this girl, who I believe is called Natalia, find out that their closest friends had actually betrayed them, hers being Boris, her fellow programmer, and Bond's being 006, who is actually alive now and is the villain. So he is somehow the son of some important Russians that they don't like. And he's like, oh man, I'm going to take revenge because I remember this from when I was 5. And then he tries to blow up all of London's electronics so that he can take a bunch of money from the banks. And Bond and Natalia stop, and the American pulls up in the car afterwards and is like, need a ride? And then that's it.
The great Joe Don Baker playing the American agent. Yes.
He was phenomenal.
Yeah. I don't
think
and
there's a sexy assassin too, just FYI.
Xenia Onatop, which,
yes.
I'm so used to the Daniel Craig Bonds, which kind of rein in a lot of the camp, that I'd forgotten that one of James Bond's franchise's trademarks was femme fatales with crazy inappropriate names. And of course he makes the joke. I mean, it's practically an Austin Powers bit, right? And she is, Famke Janssen is an assassin, a Russian assassin who achieves orgasm essentially by killing people.
Yes.
And one of her trademarks is achieving orgasm while killing people while having sex with them. She's like a Black Widow, also another Russian assassin.
She can also move things with her mind. Or is that the wrong movie franchise? That's X-Men.
Well, that's true. And there's another X connection in this movie. Did you pick it up?
No.
There's also a Harry Potter connection. Did you pick that up?
No, but I picked up the Game of Thrones connection.
/ Lord of the Rings connection.
Yeah. Boromir / Ned.
Yes.
The Harry Potter connection. Oh, that's going to make me feel like an idiot.
Well, it don't, because
no, Bobby Coltrane. He's Hagrid. He's the
yes.
I remember that. Yeah. It came back to me.
Yeah. It wasn't until I think he was halfway through his scenes that I was like, holy shit, that's Hagrid.
You're like, oh, he's the one with the 3-headed dog. Oh, no, that's Harry Potter.
The other X-Men connection was Boris, who was Natalia's friend. Yeah, Alan Cumming was Nightcrawler in X2.
Oh, I never realized he played Nightcrawler. Holy crap.
Yeah.
I love Alan Cumming. I just never realized that was him. I watched the X-Men. Wow, we're already off track. I watched the X-Men movies back when I was like in high school, and I loved them. But I never really knew actors or actresses, obviously, as is evidenced by this recording right here.
It's okay. This movie it's like a pop-up video of, who's who in this movie that went on to do other things.
Cast. A really big cast.
It is, but the thing is, not all of them were, the big superstars we know them as today. The thing that struck me, my gobsmacking moment was in that bar that that Robbie Coltrane's character owns. He's like a Russian gangster. He's got his girlfriend and her little quartet singing. I think it was "Stand by Your Man" or something like that. Mm-hmm. The lead singer was Minnie Driver. Yeah. Right? Who
Aaron
would go on
that one.
Yeah, it was 3 years later. I think she did Good Will Hunting, which put her on the map here anyway. So yeah, that freaked me out. I'm like, why isn't she getting top billing? Oh, it's because she was a nobody at this point. No offense. Yeah. So aside from the cameos,
driver.
A backseat driver?
No, Maxi. She's Minnie Driver before. Now she's Maxi Driver.
That just sounds disgusting somehow.
It does.
Yeah.
Everything I say sounds disgusting these days. Extreme bondage, maxi driver, like there's no hope.
No, there really isn't. But that's why we have James Bond to offer us hope for the world. So you appreciated this movie. The first time I watched it, which was probably within the last 10 years, I don't remember when it was, I hated it. And I think it was because I had seen the Daniel Craig Bonds and I'd seen a couple of the Connery Bonds, which even though they're like the 1960s and you kind of think, oh, it's cheesy Austin Powers stuff. I mean, those are some solid, like, serious action movies with a little bit of not so much camp, but the innuendo is a bit like kind of eye rolling instead of just, head smacking. Whereas Brosnan in this one, the action is completely out of control. Like that opening sequence. Yeah, he's taking a motorcycle down a runway for a plane that's about to go off a cliff, and he like turns the cycle around and catches the plane, and then it's diving and he pulls it back up. All the things you've described. That's like the least ridiculous action sequence in this film. Talking about Natalia, when that Russian satellite office blows up, first of all, the bad guys come in, they execute everybody in the building. She gets off because she was in the cafeteria getting tea, or the kitchenette, and she ducked. The place completely explodes. Everything's on fire. Everything is imploding around her, and she's totally fine. There's like 4 different shots where they cut back to her in the rubble, and then something else terrible happens. But she gets out, and she climbs up through the smoldering heap of a satellite dish opening that every surface should have been like 5,000 degrees.
Yeah,
but she's just like
hot.
yeah, but like no gloves, nothing. She's just like, oh, it is fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many scenes like that where I thought to myself, okay, Cole, you're watching a campy movie. You gotta just chill out, because there's a scene where they're flying over this water like basin in the plane. It's Bond and Natalia, and they're like, nothing's there. Let's fly back again. And as they fly back, a missile just shoots out of the water and hits the plane on the wing. First of all, like, how are they not instantly dead? Second of all, he lands the plane, skids on the water and into the forest, and they both just like take a nap for a little bit, and then they're fine. And the whole time I just want to be like, come on, and just rip my eyeballs out. But then I'm like, no, this is why these movies exist, so that you can watch stuff like this. Like, it's so rare for me that a movie just like panders to its own camp so successfully. It's just like, it gets it. Like, who cares? It's like the Fast and the Furious movies. They're action for action's sake. They're not action for telling, identifying some major theme. It's supposed to be a dumb action movie, and that's what it is. It's not grandstanding as something it isn't. And that's why I'm able to overlook all these really stupid scenes, unlike with Gremlins.
You know what? Anyway, no, Fast and the Furious is a great parallel, because I had to rewire my brain while watching this viewing, because whereas I was really mad the first time I watched this film and I didn't remember a whole lot about it, I was more forgiving this time, and I enjoyed it a bit more. And I found that, there's some parts that are serious and some parts that are kind of light, but it's not really bad. It's just a different beast, right? It's a 90s action movie.
Right.
But the thing that blew my mind was a trope that I've seen in movies before, but it's not something that I think is as prevalent for people to call it out all the time. But I've noticed stealth helicopters in the very last scene of the film, after they've escaped the second giant satellite facility that's blown up. Bond and Natalia are making out in the grass, and she's like, someone will see, and he's like, there's no one around for 25 miles. And then of course Joe Don Baker, the American, shows up, and he's like, hey, y'all need a lift. And they're like, where's your reinforcements? And he goes like, does that the whistle thing. I can't whistle. And then all of a sudden, all these like Marines pop up in the grass all around them. That's fun and that's cool. But then all of a sudden, 2 helicopters lower, like right over their heads.
Where were they before?
And why didn't anyone hear them? There's no such thing as a stealth helicopter. You hear it coming from a mile away.
There's also no such thing as a literal tank not destroying every street it walks on. or it rolls over. And I'm not talking like it does a lot of destroying. Do not get me wrong. And that's pretty. I feel like it's accurate. I don't know how tanks work. My only tank experience is at the Cantini Park out in Winfield, Illinois.
I've been to Cantini too.
I used to live very close to there, so I've been there many times, and I have climbed on the tanks, and they're heavy and they're big, but it feels to me like that city they were in is a lot of elevated streets, like man-made kind of streets. I'm like, the tank would crush those, and it would just fall into a pit. Like, I don't know what you're expecting, but again, I didn't care. I was like, fuck yeah. James Bond is driving a tank. Nevertheless, like, not even caring for where he found the keys to the damn thing. He just hopped in and drove. Did he hotwire it? And it's just hilarious how it's also hilarious how the Russians who have taken Natalia and are driving away from him in a car are just like, they can't think of any way to possibly avoid the tank. And the entire time I'm thinking, all they have to do is go over one of the myriad bridges that is in this city. That tank's going to destroy it. Like, it'll just fall in. But they're like, nope, let's keep him on the chase. It's just, again, it's one of those moments where you can laugh at it, but the laughter helps you overlook how silly it is. And you're like, yeah, action, man. Like, it kind of gets your adrenaline going, and you just forget all the stupid stuff.
You know, you just reminded me of, you've seen Prometheus, right?
Oh, yeah, great movie. People can't see my facial expressions. That was sarcasm.
Well, they might. I reserve the right to post this to YouTube.
Oh, excellent! I'm in.
I don't know. I still have to make that determination. We'll see how you do. No, but it's like in the one of that movie's 17 climaxes where the donut derelict spaceship is rolling, and then Charlize Theron is running in a straight line.
Straight line. Yep. I remember us talking about that in Alien, and I was like, just walk to the side like 10 steps.
Right. So this car was in a city street. Just make a right and go down a different block.
And like I've been listening. I promise this will relate. I've been listening to the Office Ladies podcast, and it's basically two of the cast members from The Office who played Pam and Angela. They are recapping the episodes, and I'm learning a lot about how TV is made just because of their little insights. They were talking lately about how there was a script supervisor who literally is in charge of saying things like, "Hey, in the last cut, you were holding your coffee cup in your left hand. I need, you know this better than I do, I'm sure. But just, as an FYI." And then I'm like, is there a script supervisor in any of these action movies being like, hey, why would somebody run straight from this donut? And is the director just being like, nah, it looks cooler this way? I want to know how those battles are fought and won, because this is very perplexing to me. And I get it. It doesn't have to be scientifically accurate. I'm the one who's even saying, like, it's fun when it's not accurate. It's still a good action movie. But, like, isn't there somebody who's raising their voice and saying, this doesn't quite compute? Apparently not, especially in 1995.
I feel like those decisions are made before they actually start rolling cameras on the action scenes. I think, like, a script Oh my God! It sounds like there's a tank rolling over my house. I don't know if it's out by you, but there's a giant thunder and what sounds like a hailstorm happening outside.
I haven't heard it at all. Maybe it'll hit me soon.
Dude, this is so weird. Anyway, if my roof collapses, I hope that's not a jinx. But yeah, call 911.
Mine says 80% chance in 30 minutes, so probably on the way.
It's coming your way, yeah. But no, I think the script supervisor's role in that case would be like, I don't know, James Bond. He popped his head out of the tank to see where he was going in this cut, and then in the next cut, he's inside the tank. Like the whole idea of driving in a straight line from a tank, that was script level before they got out into that street.
Fair.
Yeah. So, but what I loved about that scene. There wasn't a CGI in this movie. There was some like rear projection, like when they're climbing the scaffolding on the satellite thing at the end. But
or when he's flying through the sky into the airplane.
Yeah, it works. It's not quite as hilarious as some older movies because they'd gotten to the point where it was pretty convincing. I think on a big screen it'd probably be even more convincing. But you're watching it high def on like a computer monitor or something. It's like eh. However, the tank scene looked all practical, and when they're ripping up this town, and it's almost like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. It's driving through different buildings and trucks.
The
I think at one
statue.
point the statue on top of the tank was a nice touch, but I swear he ran through a Perrier truck, and I
He
feel
did.
like there was cans of. I've never seen a can of Perrier. I've only seen it in bottles.
I just thought, wow, product placement for Perrier. Like,
Yeah.
damn. There's no hint of that. I mean, it's easy if you watch a Marvel movie, to find all the product. Like, there's an Audi that they're crushing or whatever. You find all the product placement. And this, it was like I saw none of it except for IBM, and then Perrier, and it was just like this big green truck. I'm like, where did this come from? How much money did they pay to put Perrier on this truck? And it's also funny that you mentioned the CGI, because the one thing that I couldn't overlook, and that I actually said something to Aaron about as we watched, was, are those satellites supposed to be over like Neptune? Because it's just a completely blue planet. There is no land on that planet. It does not look like Earth in the slightest. It's just a glowing blue orb. I'm like, you could at least like paint some green on there or something to convince me.
Cole, have you ever been to space? Do you know what Earth looks like from up there?
Well, now I do. It's all blue.
it's the blue planet, right? No, that's a great point. It does look like there was some kind of a distortion field over Earth, or maybe it's like a subtle dig at pollution or something.
You know what? Something tells me it's not, but whatever helps you sleep at night, pal.
Greta Thunberg was conceived during the filming of this film. No,
Oh my.
no, she's not 25. Her parents went on their first date and it was GoldenEye, and they're like, "Look at all that pollution. We got to do something.
We gotta figure something out."
No, yeah. So GoldenEye. Let's talk a bit about the villain, because there is that one scene that sort of reminded me of a Harry Potter scene. In one of the later films, you'd be able to tell me which one it was, but it's the first scene where adult Voldemort has fully reformed himself, and he's like facing off against Harry Potter in a graveyard or something. And
yeah,
it seems like
a Goblet of Fire.
Okay, a scene that seemed to go on for 6 hours, but I'm sure it was only 15 minutes. Just like Voldemort, like prancing around with his wand and monologuing and stuff. There's a very cool scene in what looked like a monument graveyard to the fallen USSR. I mean, this movie starts off in, I think it's supposed to be 1986, because when they flash forward, it's 9 years later, so it would have been 95. I can do math. So I was pre and post, wall, Soviet Union falling and all that stuff. So it was a cool, James Bond was in this graveyard, all these statues of Lenin and Stalin just like heaped everywhere, and broken sickles. There was some of that in the animated title sequence. But then you've got 006, Alec something or other, kind of talking about his history and his family tree and all that convoluted stuff about the Cossacks or something. I don't know my history. Huh?
Well, yeah, there's the Cossacks, and then they call him Yanis because of some Russian god. I don't even know.
Yeah, that's right. That was his code name, I guess, when they figured out who Yanis was actually 006, because he was the two-faced god. And I liked that scene. It was very kind of creepy, and not just because it reminded me of that Harry Potter moment, but it was just very, I don't know, I felt like un-James Bond. It was kind of artsy, and it was almost like taking place in the subconscious of the world, where you've got this old, betrayed kind of Soviet-era spy talking to the the new English imperialist spy who's supposed to bring him down, and there's different levels of betrayal. It was a nice touch.
Yeah, I actually really liked the villain a lot in this one. I liked both the God, I'm forgetting her name already. Famke Janssen's character,
Xenia
Choki orgasm lady, and then Xenia Onatopp, and I really liked Alec. What's his face? I feel like the Bond series kind of goes even more campy with their villains, and that's where I struggle a lot. Especially even in the Daniel Craig series, I loved Le Chiffre. I don't even know what Quantum of Solace was. The movie was terrible. But I really enjoyed Alec's role in it, because there's part of it that makes you want to redeem him, right? Because he has a history with Bond, and that some of it must have been real if they were together for that many years working. And, and he was dedicated to the mission, at least to some degree, where he was like, finish the job, Bond. And like, it was all part of his scheme. But there was that part where he goes, I even thought of bringing you in on this, but I knew that you would be loyal to the mission. And that gives a hint at much more depth than you really get elsewhere in the movie. But it gives you some sort of reason to care for him and be like, okay, he had some sort of friendship with him. That was real. But he, at the end of the day, his home country kind of won the war, and he had to settle that internal conflict for himself. And that makes him a more intriguing villain than most of the others I've seen in the Bond series, just because you have that connection to him. And you want Bond to win, but you also want him to realize that, like, this guy was your buddy, and like, now he's fucking you over. It gives you stakes, and I like that. It's hard to build those in an action movie. Like, I come out of action movies more often disappointed than not with the villains, and in this one I was really happy. So it's no Le Chiffre, but still very good.
Yeah, and something that you bring up, I feel like this is not the movie for what I'm about to suggest. This is more, I think, in the Craig era that it would be appropriate. But you'd think someone who is also a 00 agent, who ostensibly is as smart as James Bond, was trained in the same academy and the same, deceit and super spy, I don't know, annals of super spydom, would be more of a formidable foe. I mean, he's very smart, but it seems like after a while he's just doing the Bond villain thing where he's, barking orders and commandeering a train, and just like he's got the girl at gunpoint. And I don't know, I just feel like they could have set him up, if they hadn't killed him at the end, to be sort of a running villain to keep, to have Bond on the chase, kind of a deal. I think, yeah, right. In some of the Craig movies, they did put in some continuity there with the whole, like, I guess they soft introduced Spectre, which is a relic, like a reimagining of the older Bond films. But yeah, he was a really intriguing villain that I think got treated like a generic villain at the end, and it's kind of bummed me out.
Yeah, he kind of got consumed by his master plan. And it kind of reminded me of Watchmen, where Veidt was like this actually really good villain, who acted on his plan before anybody could figure it out, and didn't bother to, go cajoling about it until after he had pressed the button. And I really like the idea that you present of having a recurring kind of foil to Bond with a reason to have a vendetta against him that recurs. And it's kind of, they're always batting heads, and he becomes like the big bad, if you will, later on in the series, because I do want that campy villain, but this was wasted potential. And it also reminds me of like Harry Potter, where, yeah, he's got Voldemort and he's always there and he's ever present, but like Malfoy is his right there, right now foe, if that makes sense. You want that person who's always throwing a wrench in his plans, like making it so he can't always get right where he needs to go. And that's interesting because Bond is kind of this unstoppable force. There's always something he can do. There's always a way out for him, no matter what, and it's not always due to somebody else helping him like Hermione does with Harry, for example. It's just kind of his own intellect and skill. And I want somebody whose goal is to impede that unstoppable forciness of Bond rather than just kill him so that I can go on with my master plan. I want that personal touch. And I like the elements of this movie that Alec, that gave Alec those kind of, vibes against him. But I'm completely with you on the whole master plan thing. Like, he just gets consumed by it, and it becomes less interesting from a storytelling point of view.
Yeah, and I can kind of appreciate what they were doing as far as the production design, where the climax mirrors the opening, almost the cold open of the film, except that they are too similar. They're both in these giant buildings with, multi-level metal stairs and these containers everywhere filled with God knows what, apparently liquid nitrogen, because that's really important to have in a satellite facility. I know nothing about physics or the world of Cloak and Dagger spies, but it feels like it was just a setup to have Boris's death scene where I am invincible, and then he gets covered in liquid nitrogen.
They just wanted the ending to reflect The Shining.
The one bit of restraint is that when he has his Jack Nicholson moment where he's frozen there at the end, that the rest of the building didn't fall on him and, crush him into a million pieces. I was waiting for that. And I've seen the movie before. I was like, wait, am I missing something? But yeah, and I did like that Boris and Natalia's relationship was, they were kind of friends, but he was, a traitor the entire time. And this wonderful bit of misogyny just comes out. I mean, I guess it's a cliche, the computer programmer who has a thing against like women. He's like the lonely nerd, but he really hams it up in his final scenes, but in a way that like, oh, there's something really messed up about this guy. He's presented throughout the movie as this kind of lovable, kind of a creepy character, but you're like, oh, he's gonna be the wacky sidekick who ends up helping everybody. No, he's a devil, that kid.
Yeah, and you think that he's like, the most capable programmer in the world because he has this bravado about him. But then when Natalia comes in and she's like, he can't, he might be able to break my codes, but like it shows that they're on the same level playing field, which he leads you to believe is untrue the entire movie. It's cool how this movie plays with your expectations in that way. Again, one of the many reasons I appreciated it, it's a little more progressive than some of the other action movies you see. When this male character who's just a complete misogynist is a great programmer, it's like, okay, that's par for the course, I suppose, whatever. But then Natalia comes in and she's like, nope, I'm gonna go ahead and screw this up for you. And it's like, yes, it's that yes moment. And in many ways, I was rooting for her more than I was rooting for Bond. And that's not something I can say about most of the Bond films that I've seen. I genuinely rooted for the person who was beside him rather than the person he was. However, Pierce Brosnan is like 90s hotness at its finest. I believe I said that out loud to Erin, and she was like, oh, yeah, daddy's home. I was like, okay, yep.
Well, it's funny because back in the 80s, he was on this TV show called Remington Steele, where I don't think I ever saw an episode because I was a little bit too young for it. But I think he was playing like a British spy, and there was like this joke that, oh, this is just TV James Bond, and they end up becoming James Bond a decade later. So I guess maybe that's where some of this camp or this kind of a wry attitude comes from. I did like that in the climax when Alec is surprised to see James Bond still alive and Bond catches on to his plan. It was a total, like, shameless ripoff of Die Hard, where Hans Gruber is, John McClane busts him. He's like, all this terrorism nonsense is just a cover for you being a common thief. In fact, I think they might have even used that same line of dialogue.
There was an interesting moment in the train with Alec, because you mentioned how surprised he was to see Bond alive. And I was like, he gave him 3 minutes on the train. You know how Bond he set the timers to 3 minutes and Alec got scarred, whatever. And at the end, he flies away in the helicopter on the train scene. And he's like, I'm giving you the same 6 minutes you gave me. And Natalia's like, what does that mean? And Bond's like, we have 3 minutes. And I was like, who gives Bond 3 minutes to do anything? He will succeed. That's his whole thing. I'm like, you just shoot the guy.
Well, ask any Bond girl. All Bond needs is 3 minutes.
I know. I think I made that joke too to Aaron, but you beat me to it here.
So yeah, I am excited to watch the other Brosnan Bonds and see how they stack up, because again, my recollection of them is they get more ridiculous and more like late 90s, early 2000 eras action movie-ish. So yeah, maybe that's what we should do is we'll polish off the rest of the Brosnans. We'll do that in sequence. And then maybe consider going back to the beginning.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've seen Die Another Day, and I do not have fond memories of it.
Or Bond memories.
Yeah.
Was that the one? Was that the one with Denise Richards playing a nuclear physicist whose name was Christmas Jones or something?
I honestly don't remember. I saw it so long ago, but I remember, again, we've talked a lot about how when I was younger, I did not have as keen an eye for, storytelling or its faults. And even then I was like, something is fucked up about this movie. And I remember exactly the thing that really triggered, like, this is weird and should not have happened. But I will save it for that episode, and I will tell you that it has to do with a transformation. I'll just say that. And
Okay.
we'll go from. But yeah, I'm sure I will remember it even more vividly when I watch it again. But there's there's something going on there.
All right. Now I'm intrigued. I think the movie I was thinking of is the one that was after Die Another Day, if I have the sequence right, called The World Is Not Enough. I think Denise Richards was in that. And if you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it, although I really want to, because it's got one of the best closing lines of any movie ever, not even James Bond, but it's just like you could hear the groans, the collective groans of everybody on Earth who was watching the movie in the theater at that time. I think it might have be echoing through space still. Yeah. So
well,
till then,
I will wait with bated breath.
You said baited. Anyway, any closing thoughts on GoldenEye?
No, I loved it. It was great. I had a great time watching it, and I don't have any deeper thoughts. It was a great action movie.
I'm right there with you. It's for some reason it was just where my head was at. I think I was too fresh into the Daniel Craig Bonds. I think it's because, in my estimation, I know this is blasphemy in some circles, the James Bond movies have been on a steady downward trajectory ever since Casino Royale.
Agreed,
I know
yeah.
nobody liked Quantum of Solace. A lot of people liked what was the one after that?
Skyfall. And anybody who says
Skyfall.
Skyfall is better than Casino Royale is fucking kidding themselves. Like, get out of here. There is no world in which those movies are even comparable, let alone Skyfall being better. Like, I need to do like an expository essay on YouTube about this or something, because it pisses me off that people think it's better. And here's the thing. Skyfall's fine. It's a good movie. But Casino Royale is like top tier action movie. And it is in a completely different league of its own. Oh man, you've set me off now, Ian.
All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do the Brosnans, and we're gonna jump right into the Craigs, and we'll get to the Sean Connery Bonds somewhere in the year 23-24. But no, I'm there with you. I've only watched Skyfall once, and I probably need to be fair and go back and revisit it, which I will. But my biggest problem was it came out in the wake of The Dark Knight. And if you think about The Dark Knight and Skyfall together, they are the same movie. Now, it's unfair because they were probably in production around the same time, so it's not like someone could have stolen Christopher Nolan's or the Nolan script or anything. And well, we'll just change Batman out for James Bond. I'm not saying that.
But
having that in my right. But having that in my head, I'm like, I'm just watching a find and replace movie. I'm one of the few people who actually like Spectre. But
I enjoyed Spectre, but it wasn't like some seminal Bond film, And I think that a lot of people appreciate Skyfall, for M's arc in it and for kind of the backstory there. And I get it. And a lot of people also like that Adele sings Skyfall as the opening song. But You Know My Name by Chris Cornell is an underrated opening Bond theme for Casino Royale. Oh my gosh, I'm set off now. I can't wait to discuss the Daniel Craig ones.
Dude, I think you're the only person that I've talked to who actually appreciates Chris Cornell's You Know My Name. Bond theme or not, I legitimately love that song. I love the animated song. And I love the animated opening that goes along with it. It says so much about that iteration of James Bond before we even really know the character that it's perfect. In fact, if I come up with a theme song to this Bond to determine, it's probably just going to be the opening bars of that Chris Cornell song because it's so cool.
I agree. Oh man, I'm glad we agree on a lot of things. We disagree on others, but I don't think we fervently agreed on something as much as we do this. So I cannot wait for that discussion.
Yeah. So whenever we have that discussion, we'll let everybody know. But
whenever that is, wherever that is, whatever that is, whoever that is.
You listen to the show. I appreciate it. Well, thank you very much for talking Bond. I know this is kind of weird because we're talking about, I don't know, like the 17th movie in the series or something at this point. So I'm sure the James Bond aficionados who are listening to this will be like, you have no frame of reference. You're getting everything wrong. I fully acknowledge that we're starting from a weird place, but we'll get through all of them eventually. And maybe
We are
one day
bonded by chaos.
Yes. We'll come back and listen to this episode and be like, what were we thinking? Or we got everything right. So screw you, Bond aficionados. Thank you, Cole. And just in case this goes up on YouTube, which by saying this guarantees that it has to, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel. Let us know what your favorite James Bond movie is down below in the comments. And tell us that we're...
that subscribe button.
Yes, smash that subscribe button. Let us know how far off base we are, especially in regards to the Skyfall Casino Royale thing. Is You Know My Name the best Bond song ever? Spoiler alert, it is. Double spoiler alert, I haven't listened to all the Bond songs, so I can't say.
It is objective truth.
Well, there you go. Objective Truth by Cole Rush. I love it. Okay. Thank you very much, sir. And with that, what do we sign off with? This is a new series. Do we have a catchphrase? Or
seat. Kick seat.
No. I'm glad I have my coffee cup because I'm gonna throw up into it.
Names.com. Kickseat.com.
I'm gonna be sick. All right, I'm gonna come up with an actual sign off for the next one that we can use because I might actually edit that out. Jesus.
I really hope you don't.
Okay, your wish is my command. Have a great night, sir.
All right, you too. I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.